Hello, friends. Welcome to the ATC Double Cut. I have a special guest, an international guest joining from Canada. It is TJ Creamer, the golf course superintendent at Olympic View Golf Club in Victoria. Welcome to the show, TJ.
Hey, Micah. Thanks very much for having me on today. Long time listener, first time guest.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. We could say that you're a longtime listener, first time guest, but you and I certainly have talked and shared information many times and met at conferences and so on. And in fact, I think it was March of last year, a little bit more than 12 months ago, when I had a chance to visit you at Olympic View.
Yeah, you were out to the course and early in the year and had a chance to look around the course, check out some grass with me, and we can, as we do, continually talk turf when we're together. So
And I have been thinking about you quite a lot recently because I've been in the Pacific Northwest since April 22nd. So I was working at the Masters tournament and I visited the University of Tennessee, gave a seminar at Ori Georgetown with the Palmettos GCSA, visited my mom on the East Coast. And then I came out to Oregon and I've been visiting family here. And I had a chance I took the chance to study Poa annua greens a little bit because this is a part of the world, the Pacific Northwest, where there's a lot of excellent Poa annua greens. And I don't see a lot of Poa annua greens in Japan because in Japan, it's almost all bentgrass greens. And I don't see Poa annua greens much in Asia at all, certainly not in Thailand, where it's all warm season grasses. So I thought this is an opportunity while I'm here visiting family and working on some other stuff. I can visit a few places and look at the turf grass and find out how it's managed. And I know how you're managing the Poa annua greens. It's bent-Poa greens you have there, right? But
yeah, but bent-Poa originally seeded to Pencross 30 plus years ago now, and then of course the Poas come in, and I'd say we're predominantly Poa stand at this point.
and it depends on the green, but when I visited there last year, I saw what to me was more than 50% POA.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd say it'd be 70 to 90% POA and even higher on some greens, for sure.
And so it's it it's interesting for me. And so in my mind it's POA, but let's recognize that there is some bent there. So we'll
Yeah.
call them bent POA.
Yeah.
And as I've been traveling around the Pacific Northwest and visiting some places, I've been asking people stuff like, the typical questions: how much nitrogen do you put? How much sand do you put? How many times do you core? And the answers have been, I just lost a connection, but I'm
Yeah.
back, I think.
Yeah. You got through the how much you core and then the answers and then it cut off.
Okay, perfect. I
Yeah.
think we don't even have to edit this out, DJ.
Okay,
Hopefully,
cool.
hopefully that doesn't happen again. I try to connect to these calls through a LAN cable, but in this case, I'm just doing it through Wi-Fi, and I'm also am on a somewhat remote island, so perhaps uh, the connection may not be 100% stable. Anyway, uh, I've been asking how people are managing, and the answers are pretty typical in that it's something like 3 pounds of nitrogen, 4 pounds of nitrogen, which is 150 to 200 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare. This is on greens. And am I still here, TJ?
Yep, absolutely. You're rocking.
Okay, good. I've got all kinds of things blinking on and off on my screen, so I wasn't sure if I'm actually here. I'm
Yeah.
glad I am. So uh, that's 150 to 200 kilograms of hectare, which per hectare, which seems pretty typical for this type of grass. And based on some of the research from Rutgers about minimizing anthracnose and making sure that you still have healthy Poa annua, those seem like typical values. And also, um, as far as core aeration and sand top dressing, when I visited Oregon State University and talked with Chad Schmidt about the long-term study that's going into its 5th year now, looking at cultivation and sand top dressing of Poa greens. And they're finding that core aeration in spring and autumn with a relatively heavy sand top dressing every 2 weeks through the season in between those events is working really well to manage Poa greens. And it seems like a lot of the places that I'm visiting are trying to do that type of program. So that's kind of like the standard. And yet always in my mind, I'm like, wait, TJ's not doing it that way. So tell me a little bit, uh, how are you doing it?
Yeah, I'll give you a little bit of history. So, I mean, I started working with you back when I was an assistant at Victoria Golf Club in 2014 or somewhere around there, following MLSN, and I started that there, and then clip volume, and sort of progressed my way through. Just starting my 4th season at Olympic View now as a superintendent, and when I got here in 2021, I started right away with clipping volume and working through those same programs. So the first season, I put down 2.1 pounds of nitrogen, and then I was able to further reduce that through the next season at 1.7, and then this past year at just 1.25 pounds of nitrogen. So I've been continually able to reduce the nitrogen through the seasons, and using MLSN to make sure that my nutrients are okay, and using clip volume, and then of course using growth ratio, which I see you're calling the turf speedo these days, to manage my growth at an appropriate rate so that I'm able to keep grass happy, but not grow too much that I'm growing excess organic matter. So
Good. Let's go and have a look at the turf speedo, and we'll give, let's see. I'm I'm using a different browser here, and I'm trying to see. Hmm. Oh, I know what I need to do. Just hold on a second. Um, Sorry, everybody. I'm setting up to show about the turf speedo so I can explain, TJ, why I like to call it the turf speedo.
I like your reasoning. I've been calling it growth ratio now for a couple of years. So yesterday you switched it on me. So I don't know if I'll be able to switch in today's conversation completely.
Well, you mentioned to me in a phone call the other day about putting surfaces versus
Versus
putting
greens.
surface versus greens.
Yeah.
What when I'm trying? Why don't you explain your thinking on that
Sure, sure.
while I try to get showing which screen I want to be showing.
So I will say that managing these predominantly POA surfaces with less and less nitrogen, I don't always have green as the predominant color on the greens. They can at times be a little bit off color, especially if it's overcast out. But I never once hear comments from golfers on the greens are off color or anything like that. All I hear is compliments on how good they're rolling and how nice they're playing. So I'm starting my own little campaign to change the name of greens, which provides a connotation of a color, obviously, to putting surfaces instead. So at least that one member's starting the campaign with me. So we'll see how it goes.
That will be good. Good luck with that. So uh, I I think that I can now share my screen. It's showing a post that says turf speedo looks like this, which is the post that will give the double cut treatment to today. And I've gone back to calling it the turf speedo, which is what Jason Haynes, who invented this, um, he originally called it that. And it's speedo not in the swimsuit brand, but it's speedo in the connotation of speedometer, and looking at how fast your grass is growing. And I think for whatever reason I was like speedo when Jason first called it that, I thought that was too casual or something. And somehow we came up with growth ratio. But the problem with growth ratio, if you do a Google search for that, it it's actually a concept in investing, in business, in looking at the 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 profit increase or the revenue increase in certain businesses or in investments or in economics. And so any if you're searching for that, it would be drowned out by the business advice. So I thought, okay, that's one reason, because growth ratio already means something. You can't make a hashtag out of growth ratio because it's going to be uh, related to business. But we could make a hashtag out of turf speedo, and nobody else is going to be using that except maybe Benton Hodges, who has an AI generated image of a what a turf speedo swimsuit might look like.
That sounds like an interesting rabbit hole you went down on that Google search.
Yeah. So that's one, but the other reason, and the one that is actually more practical, I think, is when we've got the growth ratio and we calculate it and we come up with values like 0.27. It's more difficult to say 0.27 than it is to just say 27. And also, if we think of 27 as a speed, we can think, well, that's like the speed that we might drive as we're slowing down going through a school zone. And if we're going 100, that would be pretty fast. And if we're going 200, that's really fast. Even if we're going 200 in kilometers per hour, that's still a relatively fast speed. And then I was talking with Jason about this. I was saying, well, what if we just, um, what if we talk about this in terms of, instead of the ratio, we just multiply it by 100, so we get 20 or 50 or 100. And then he also mentioned, he's like, yeah, and if you're on a expressway and everybody else is going 80 and you need to be going 80 and you're only going 40, that's also dangerous. And so it's like if you're going 400, that's probably too fast. If you're going 40 when you need to be going 80, that's also like dangerous. And it just seemed easier to me to express it as an integer value and something that's kind of on a scale that that if you're going 0, you're not moving at all. It just kind of makes sense as a speedo. So I'm like, yeah, get rid of the decimal points, just having a number that's close to a speedometer. Why not? So we'll see how this rebranding goes from my side, if I can change it from growth ratio to speedo, or if it's too ingrained.
I think you're early in the game, so I think you're okay. I think there's a lot of adoption coming, so you should be fine.
And why do you think there should be some adoption coming, or there will be some adoption coming?
I mean, to me, it's the most important tool that I'm using right now to manage my greens. So, it's not like something where I just go out and say, okay, I want to put out 1.25 pounds of N in 2023. I'm looking, first of all, starting with MLSN, making sure that I've got nutrients enough for the year in the program. And if I need some more throughout the year based on growth potential, then I'm going to be adding some more nutrients, be that potassium or phosphorus or whatever that might be. And then as I go through the season, I'm taking clip volumes on every green every time we mow. And that's generating the ability to create the turf speedo by comparing that to what the suggested growth might be from growth potential and what I'm actually seeing on my greens. And I'm trying to find myself somewhere in the 50 range for a turf speedo. And that seems to be a pace for me that allows me to grow enough grass so that I've got 100% turf coverage and have quality greens, and grow enough grass that I'm avoiding any anthracnose throughout the summertime, but then not grow so much grass that I'm generating extra clip, which means extra mowings, which means extra top dressing and extra aeration and all the inputs that go along with growing higher at a higher speed than I need to. So
And I've brought up the turf speedo chart from the post yesterday, which I'll put a direct link to this in the show notes. And this, I said it's on Vancouver Island, Canada. This actually is your data that you shared with me. So this is from Olympic View from the start of January up until the middle of this week. And it was 28 at your last mow. And you said your target is 50. and we looked at how it's been changing over the past few weeks, and it's not changing a lot over the past few weeks. It's been hovering around 25 up to about 35. So
Yeah.
this indicates that you could probably put a little bit more fertilizer
Hmm.
and allow the grass to grow a little bit more.
Yeah, so I find in the shoulder seasons that it's not as useful, like not as accurate. I think maybe in an office hours you talk with Bjarni and Jason about sometimes in the shoulder seasons it's not as useful. But I find once I get into regular mowings, which when we start to get some consistent warmth here, should be anytime soon, then that's when I can use it on a 7 or 14 day trailing average to predict if I need to add nitrogen or if I need to add growth regulators. So right now it's not as useful, but get into mid-season, that's where it really starts to shine for me. So.
But what Bjarni finds, and what I've found in general, is that in the springtime, in the shoulder seasons, the growth ratio tends to be, sorry, the speedo tends to be higher um, than it is in the mid season. But
Yeah,
what I'm seeing here is you're cruising along at, let's say, 30. It's not cruising along at 75 or 80.
I would say that I'm on a bit on the lean side right now, which I'm comfortable with. That I need to mow less right now. My speeds are excellent. I think we were 11 feet 9 inches yesterday with just a roll. The mow was the day before. But as I get closer to the warm season and anthracnose pressure coming in a month or so here, I'm going to start adding a bit more nitrogen to try and get that speedo up to 50%. Because being at 25, 30% is a little bit outside of my comfort range when it comes to anthracnose pressure. So
But you do use fungicides, don't you?
I do. So yeah, I mean, Pacific Northwest, as many know, it's microdochium season almost year round here. I've seen it on July 1st on some greens occasionally. Um, but June through August, we do have anthracnose pressure, especially on a pretty much POA stand. So I have a regular preventative anthracnose program, and I have not seen anthracnose over the past couple of years. So it's been good.
And if you would look, so your primary disease is anthracnose in summer, snow mold or microdochium, kind of year round, but mostly in autumn, winter, and spring.
Hmm. Yes.
And do you know how many fungicide applications you'd make in total in a typical year?
At 15 or so, I'd probably be on a 21 to 28 day interval. And it almost hops right from mycodochium season to anthracnose season. And then if there's opportunities to stretch windows a little bit, like this time of year, if I'm coming out of microdochium pressure and not into anthracnose pressure, I'll be able to stretch a window for mycodochium applications right about now. The other thing is if I get a little bit of microdochium right now, I know I can grow it out. Whereas if I get some in October, November, it's going to stick around for a lot longer. So I'm a little bit more risky this time of year than I would be in late fall. So.
Wow, you are dropping all kinds of valuable information here. So, let's see. We've looked at the speedo, and we've talked about that a little bit. You've talked about uh, managing disease. Um, you did say that your nitrogen rate, as you've gotten to know the property and you've evaluated how the grass responds, your nitrogen rate went down year after year, and
Hmm.
you're checking how much the grass is growing, only putting nitrogen as needed. How is it that you end up with a nitrogen rate last year that's, you said 1.25 pounds per thousand square feet, which is about six, yeah, that's like 6 grams per
Yeah,
square meter.
6.2 or
Six,
something.
yeah, 62 kilograms per hectare or something like that, which that's like a bent grass number. Maybe even it seems low for creeping bent grass in this climate. And that's why it's just so surprising for me that you can do this on a primarily on a stand on a putting surface where the sward is dominated by Poa annua. And but see, the thing is, and I keep talking with people, if you can do that, you're growing less grass. If you're growing less grass, you need to put less sand, because if you're growing less grass, you'll produce less thatch. So it's
Hmm.
not it's not putting low nitrogen for the or not it's not putting a lower amount of nitrogen. I don't want to call it low nitrogen because it's an appropriate amount of nitrogen for your situation. But as you grow less grass, which you can do by putting less nitrogen, there's a lot of benefits that come from that. And we've talked about this for 6 or 7 years now. After you asked me that question, I think in January 2018 at the Western Canada Turfgrass Association conference, and you said, Micah, have you ever tried to calculate the cost of 1 gram of nitrogen? Like what when you put one uh, increment of nitrogen, in this case, it would be 10 kilograms per hectare or 1 gram per square meter. What's the cost of that? Because it causes you to mow, it causes you to have to use more water as the grass grows more, it causes you to have to put more sand, and it causes you to have to put more potassium, more phosphorus, and so on. And you're just like really, really getting into this. And but then the benefits seem like, wow, there really are some serious benefits from this.
Yeah, when we talk about the cost of a gram of nitrogen, you talked about some cost of inputs, but we also have to talk about, green fees. I have not aerated my greens and had closures in 3 years now. So I'm not having a week in the spring where our green fees are reduced because we've aerated greens. And the cost of inputs and looking at sustainability of an operation, yeah, it's become a bit of an addiction for me to see where we can take this to, because that 1 gram of nitrogen is exponential in the costs that follow that. So it's been a lot of fun chasing down this path.
That and that's why I'm so glad to have a chance to talk with you uh, and to learn more about this. Clarify for me, when you say aeration, do you mean what type of aeration? Because I know you still do a little bit of venting, but when you're saying aeration, do you mean hollow tine, solid tine, what diameters? And then when you
Yeah,
haven't done that for 3 years, can you just say, well, what have you done?
yeah.
Because I know the greens get disrupted a little bit, or they did last year.
Yeah, so what I'll take you through since I started. So that spring of 2021, there was already a course, a greens aeration plan for that spring, and I'd only been a couple months. So we went ahead and did a 3/8 solid tine with top dress. And then that winter, it had been done in the past where they do a 1/2 inch deep tine on greens through the winter. So I did that. And then that would be my last, significant aeration practice. Following that, I did needle tines the first summer of 2021, again in 2022, but reduced them slightly. And then last year, I only needle timed 3 times. And this year, I'm trying to see if we can go without. Just not seeing the scientific data come back to say that it's going to help me with gas exchange, and I'm not seeing any huge benefits when I do it. I do feel great after I go out and yield time greens. Man, it's one of my favorite things to do because I feel like I'm doing something really beneficial for them. But I don't feel great when I'm paying for the cost of those tines or paying for the cost of labor to go out and do that needle time. Sometimes I think, like say a Toro 648 is an awesome machine to go out and punch a lot of holes really quickly. But just because I can doesn't mean I should. So I'm trying to always evaluate and see if there's a way that we can do without a practice and still have as good or maybe even better greens because we're not disrupting them at all.
That is just so surprising. Uh, I don't doubt you. Uh, it's it's just so surprising to hear that you you did a 1/2 inch deep tine in the winter of 2021 going into 2022. And that
Yes.
was the last serious. So that was uh we're going into the third growing season now.
Yes.
So you're more than 2 years since that has been done. It was the summer of 2022 happened without anything, and the year 2023 happened without anything other than some needle tining. And
Hmm.
now you're saying that it makes you feel good to do that. You've got the machine to do it, but you realize it's actually not giving you anything tangible or quantifiable in improved playability or improved turfgrass performance. And so you realize maybe you don't need to be doing that.
Yeah, and we'll like my assistants, they like doing it as well. So we'll look at a green and say, hey, I'd really like to needle time that. And I say, okay, well, you needle time that third of a green or a quarter of a green, and then we'll see what the two sides look like in a week or in a day or in a month, and we can't notice any difference at all. So if I'm not seeing an improvement, then why am I going to do something? So
That's That's it's interesting when you pay this much attention to it, and so you're doing really what I call the grammar of greenkeeping, which I've written a short book about that, and it's the type of stuff I write about on the Asian Turfgrass website, and more so on the paceturf.org website. And the grammar of greenkeeping to me is recognizing that the growth rate is really important, and then realizing that different maintenance practices will have an effect on the growth rate, and then actually measuring the growth rate, measuring the inputs, and measuring the playing conditions. And by adjusting all of these things, the growth rate and the inputs and the disruption, we're able to optimize the playing conditions. That's the idea. And I think you're doing this uh, about as intensively as anybody. And it's
it's
just
fun.
it's just like, wow, those results. It seems almost unbelievable. Um, to me, even to me, um, because it's so outside of what the research says. Because you look at the research and it says, okay, Poa annua needs 3 pounds, or it's implied that you need to give it 3 pounds, and you need to core aerate it, and you need to put all this sand. But you're saying in your situation and the way you're managing, you're able to get excellent results without all of that, which just seems such a good selling point for the grammar of greenkeeping for people who would want to try to implement this.
Yeah, it's funny, you use the word intensively, but I would describe what I'm doing as not intensive. It's almost the opposite, right? I'm doing less and getting more out of it. To speak a bit on the conditions, because we haven't touched on that, like our summer goal is between 10 feet and 10 feet 6 inches as far as green speed. When that's the stated goal, in reality, we try to be 10.6 to 11 just because I don't really want to be close to 10. And we do the bobble test daily. So we're doing stimp and bobble test daily. And our daily bobble test goal is 8, but generally we try to be 8.5 or higher. So I have had no issues in attaining that. And that's with mowing every other day and rolling on the day we don't mow. So we're not having to mow and roll on the same day. We're not having to double cut. We're not having to do anything intensive to gain these speeds. So just paying attention to the speeds. And I treat greens individually. Like there'll be greens that I'm watching the growth, the turf speedo on individual greens and say, oh, this green's been lagging behind for a week, 10 days now. And my GM mentioned once, he said, oh, 18 green looks a little bit off colored. I say, yeah, I've been watching that for about 2 weeks on the turf speedo, and I'm just going to go put 0.5 grams of N, tenth of a pound shot on that individual green to be able to bring it up to par with the rest of them. So that's about as intensive as it gets. Is looking at it, looking at the speedo and going, just give that one a little touch and this one a little touch, and trying to bring them all in line. So it takes a little bit of following some spreadsheets and tracking, looking at the data, and then going at looking at the conditions and saying, yeah, that makes sense. But with regards to effort actually put in to attain these surfaces, it's very minimal. Just looked at my numbers today, and for the last, since February 1st, we had some snow in January. My average green speed's been 11 feet, and the average bobble test score has been 8.8. So, and my members love the conditions. I've had members multiple times come up and say, I've been here member 30 years, and I've never seen the greens in this good a condition. So, and that's all I'm hearing consistently from feedback. So, yeah, it's great, and it's not too hard to do.
That's that's great feedback. So the club has members, and it's also open. It's like semi-private. And can you tell us about the number of rounds, open year round, or closed sometimes in the winter,
Yeah, yeah.
and
So
that?
I call us a semi-private golf club. So we have a membership, and then as well as a general public playing. We also host a lot of corporate tournament events. So green speeds for them are they would they would like them to be a lot slower for the corporate tournament events because those rounds tend to get a little bit long. But we're open year round, aside from 1 to 2 weeks of snow generally we'll get, and maybe some frozen conditions. But and we do about 56,000 rounds annually.
And you don't get a lot of snow.
No, we'll have 1 to 2 weeks of snow cover per year on average, I'd say, but it's not a regular occurrence. The biggest challenge we have is the grass doesn't grow a lot through the winter, but they're still playing golf all winter long. So from end of October, say November, until about, I don't know, hopefully a week from now, but usually around April 20th, I think is Jason Haynes' date, the grass starts to grow again. So we could kind of go in a constant decline through the winter months. And no matter what you do, you're going to have a constant decline of turf conditions through the winter. So making sure that you have a good quality product going into that time is important.
You shared a few pictures with me. I put one of them up on the screen, um, and I want to show for the people watching this. You'll be able to see what we're looking at, and you can see the conditions that we're talking about with this way of managing. And for those of you listening, we will describe what we're looking at. So this is a green surrounded by trees. In You said this was a morning shot.
Yeah, that's the morning, and that's the sun would be peek through that little gap in the back there at some point through the morning, and that's about all the sun that that green gets, unfortunately. So it's one of my more shady sites. I have 3 or 4 greens that have a lot of shade around them. We've got a beautiful stand of cedar and Douglas fir trees around the property, but they do cause some issues like this. But when I first got to the course, those shady greens had patches of areas of turf on them. There was no grass, there was just sand, and that I was told that that's kind of how it happened, and they just come back every spring. The POA fills in, but after a year of managing this way, just that first season, I had 100% grass cover on those greens from that point forward, and haven't lost any grass on them since. So I think part of the program is just the consistency of the nitrogen applications. There's not periods of excessive growth. There's not periods of not enough growth because there's not enough nitrogen. So the plant kind of becomes accustomed to the nitrogen rate always being there, so it can just do its thing. I think that's one of the reasons that I've been able to reduce year over year. I think it's a 40% reduction since my first year, but it's been almost 20% reduction each year in nitrogen, just because it's dialed in that much closer each year, and the plant's used to it. The other thing that I do, so I mow greens at 0.125, so an eighth of an inch, and I leave them there year round. I don't go up or down with that height in the winter. They just stay there. So again, trying to provide a consistent growth structure for them.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what's the mowing height. So that's about 3.2 millimeters or something like that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, which is
let's look at
higher
a
than
few.
most here. Like most guys would be around 100 thou or 090 or something like that to get the speeds that I'm getting. So managing the growth closely allows me to get those higher speeds without having to take the heights down. So
And I was surprised. I asked you about growth regulators. When we looked at the speedo chart earlier, that's a speedo of 28 this week, and that's with no growth regulator this year so far, right?
yeah, no, no, none at all. Last year I did my least amount. The first couple of years I messed around with them a little bit, but last year I went into it with the goal of I'm not going to use them until the growth rate gets out of control. And how that happens is get into July and August, and I start to get microbial release of organic matter breakdown. So I wasn't applying N, and my turf speedo was still going up and up and up. So at that point, I decided to apply some growth regulators and bring the growth down, and it worked really well. So that's going to be how I use them again this year. Is look for a point where I can't control the growth, and then that's where I would to bring those into play. So much like Bill talks about with the gas and the brake, then I've taken my foot right off the gas, and I need the brake at that point to slow down the speed. So
And what about seed heads? I know a lot of places are using uh, Ethifon, I think, Proxy. Is that a product that's available in Canada?
not to my knowledge, no. I'm not up
Do
to date on
people
growth regulators, to be honest, because I don't use them much. So
okay. Do you
yeah.
happen to know if other clubs might be putting something to try to suppress
I don't
the
believe so. I think there's some new products starting to become available in Canada, but I don't think they're very widespread use yet. So, and I've heard of some potential seed head reduction with Primo usage, but I've never really seen it. And I've got a lot of seed head right now, and we're able to get speeds and smoothness. So it's not something that I'm going for.
let's let's look at a few more pictures. This is an afternoon image, I think, from yesterday. Um, and the green looks pretty good from a distance. And so that's a primarily Poa annua green from a distance in the afternoon sunshine that is not been not had any serious cultivation since the winter of 2021 going into 2022, and it received a shocking fescue like nitrogen rate of 62 grams, or sorry, 62 kilograms per hectare, something like that. 1.25 pounds approximately last year, which is um, it's less than average. It's
Yeah,
something that is more typical for fine fescue or creeping bentgrass in a really short season kind of place. But here, you put a mower on the greens almost every month, don't you? Is there ever Would you
yeah.
typically mow once a month in the winter at least, even when it's
Yeah,
cold?
yeah, at least in December, January, we'll get at least one mow a month out on them just to clean up the variability. So I think, and it mentioned variability, something that if I had a pure bent grass stand, I could mow even less than I do, but I start to get variability between the different types of POA and the bent that's existing and all that kind of thing. So sometimes I end up needing to mow just to even things out, not to mention the different microclimates from green to green will have slightly different growth rates as well. So
Now I've brought up on the screen a screenshot that you sent me of the Olympic View Greens Conditions website that is public facing. I think this is available for the members or for guests. And the measurement yesterday on May 23, the green speed was 11 feet 9 inches. And that's on 0.125 mixed stand of POA bent, no PGR applications. And what was the treatment yesterday on the greens?
that was just a roll yesterday morning. The day before was a cut and roll because the previous day we got rained out with 15 mils of rain, so we didn't do any action on the green. And then I sort of chased that with a cut and roll because you were supposed to be coming last night to visit, and unfortunately couldn't make it. So I wanted to make sure I had some nice greens. So then just with the roll yesterday, they kicked up the speed pretty good. So
Nice. Yeah. That's a sad story. What happened yesterday was I uh I talked to TJ uh we're recording this on a Friday. We talked on the phone on Monday, and I had said, I've visited all these interesting golf courses and talked about POA management. And I keep thinking, I really want to see the greens that TJ's managing. I want to see the putting surfaces that TJ is managing, because I know these numbers that you're sharing with me about what the playing conditions are, what the inputs are. They're they're outside the range of what's normal in this part of the world. I want to see with my own eyes. So TJ said, well, why don't you come over? And I looked into it, and actually there's a seaplane. I'm on an island in the San Juan Islands, and from the capital on another island, the county capital, Friday Harbor, there is a seaplane that flies to Victoria Harbor. And I thought, wow, well, I can just pop over. It must be like a 10-12 minute airplane ride. It's not far. And so we had that all planned. And yesterday was a sunny day, as you saw in that picture I just shared. But as soon as I reached the plane at the harbor in Friday Harbor, he said, you probably have received an email or a text message from the airline that there's high winds in Victoria and we're not sure if we're going to be able to fly. Well, 45 minutes later or so, they checked the weather a few more times. They said it would be too risky. The winds were above the limits for that particular plane to land in Victoria Harbor. And they said, we're not going today. And so I got back on the ferry and came back over here to the other island where I'm staying. And I thought, TJ and I will just have to do this podcast, because originally I'd invited you on Monday when we talked. I said, could you do a podcast this week? And you said, yeah, but why don't you just come over? So
Yeah.
now we're going back to that original plan. But
Yeah.
fortunately, you did go out on that very um, sunny evening last night when I was supposed to be touring the course with you, and you took some pictures. And so what I'm showing now is a green that really it definitely shows some different patches. This was yesterday afternoon, and we're
Yeah.
looking at different types of POA here and a little bit of bent grass.
Yeah, so this is probably one of my worst aesthetically looking greens. It's sun, pure sun, but it does have a lot more modeling to it, so it won't always look great. The ironic thing behind this is actually the green that we take the green speed and smoothness measurements on, right near that pin on the right-hand side every day. We did a few different greens a couple years ago to figure out what was a good representative. We don't really have time to do samples on a few greens every day. So we do this green every day. So even though the aesthetics aren't great, this is the benchmark that we use for all our data collection with playability. So definitely a lot more modeling here. And I think you have another shot of some more POA that's on this green too. So
Yeah,
that's
so
different green
yeah,
there, but again, you can see some modeling. So
but yeah, it's 100% grass cover, and as you say, they're putting surfaces and not necessarily we don't they don't have to be bright green.
it's funny that that previous picture, Micah, before I took it, the group walking off there, it was a corporate tournament, and I watched them for 3 or 4 minutes. They'd finished putting, but they were all standing up on that top ridge and tapping putts down that slope, trying to get the hole in one or get their shot. So the greens are rolling so nice that they're just having a lot of fun playing around out there. So that brought a little smile to my face as I was taking these photos. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think that is wonderful. So this one, the green's in the shade towards the end of the day. That one from we're looking down on the practice putting green, I believe.
Yeah, yeah, and
And
a chipping green in the back, so you can see in the sun the color and the shade the color. Good contrast there. So.
and yeah, I mean it looks very even. Um, it's it's not like it's standing out as being yellow to
No,
me.
much like you say, it's not, my numbers aren't normal or aren't usual. Sometimes the color and the visual is not normal or usual. Not normal or usual, what I would say would be awesome greens that you see, like a checker pattern walk mode green that just looks phenomenal. These are never that, but they're always a quality playability. So yeah, so you can see some different colors in there.
Yeah. So but I'm showing a picture now that shows a lot of bent grass. What that that is the green with the most bent grass in it?
The front nine greens that get more sun still have that's remaining Pencross, and the previous superintendent had seen an increase in that sort of somewhat existing Pencross population that was still there based on his practices, and he had lowered the nitrogen applications and managed more closely to what I'm doing. And then as I continued to do that and take them even lower, I'm definitely favoring bent grass, which is my goal. I fertilized with just ammonium sulfate, and I'm now overseeding. I've got some Pareto heads that I picked up this year, and I'm overseeding every 3 weeks with the newer varieties of bent. I mean, it's great to see the bent coming in here, but I don't want Pencross greens. I want pure select greens or pure distinction greens or crystal blue links. I want the newer bents that aren't going to be so lazy laying over like this stuff here. So
Well, have you did you interseed last year or you're starting that this year?
I did a little bit last fall was my first app. I did one app with the Moretos just to try them out before I purchased them, and then I've done just finished a second app this year. So I've got some plugs growing in my office to try and show that I'm getting some bent grass, and I feel like I'm seeing some. But hopefully through this year we're able to pound some seed in there and get that take. So
Yeah, because
um,
you need to. I changed the picture to show one with your feet in the very bottom of the image for scale, and then showing the density and the amount of seed heads, which that's not a huge amount of seed head, considering you don't have any chemical on it to keep the seed head out. Um, and that's a lot of density. So those Moreto heads are like little cores. they pull like a miniature core and then that's where the seed goes? How does that work?
No, so the Moreto overseed heads just it's like a dimple seeder basically, but they're reels that go on a triplex. So it just makes a little tiny dimple and dent and drops the seed in there. So fairly efficient with the seed and a good delivery method. So that's what I've gone with for those. So yeah, this picture I thought was important just to show that there is density there, and this is a representative of all the greens. There's not areas that are super thin or greens that are thin. We do have good density, and the whole focus of this program is 100% turf cover. So I'm always trying to maintain that.
Okay. That that's good. I really like this image because it does. This one looks a little bit more yellow
Hmm.
if we look at it. So for people who want to say this is not for me, I'm never going that low with POA. Um, with nitrogen, then you can look at this and say, yeah, that maybe people don't want that. Maybe they want it to be greener, so that they can look at that image. But I'm looking at it, going, that's a nice putting surface. Let's look. You took some cores yesterday, and I
Hmm.
think before we finish talking today, let's look at the images of the cores and let's talk a little bit about the lack of thatch that we're seeing here and talk
Yes.
about, because you do still put sand. You said you don't do aeration, but you do put sand. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so we do OM 246 samples every year with you. So I use those to try to see where I'm at. So again, I'm not just going to go low on a program with nitrogen and state a number, and I'm not going to not aerate and say I should be good with this top dressing. I've got checks and balances with this, and for organic matter accumulation using the OM 246 tests. Again, it's been 4 years now. I usually do about 6 or 7 greens. A couple of years ago, I did every green. And I think, again, this coming year, I'm going to do every green with the OM2. And I find some variability between greens. And this year, I've actually prescribed a top dressing program that each green is getting a slightly different amount of top dressing based on the organic matter level that they have. So I find that the greens that didn't have grass on them when I got here, or little small areas on them that didn't in the shade, they were also the lowest organic matter greens. So increasing the organic matter on those greens seemed to help them sustain the winter traffic and that slow decline that we do see through the winter. And now I've been able to narrow it down to, I think, 8% OM2 is my kind of happy place where I'm not going to be having too much organic matter. They're going to be soft or hold moisture, but I'm not going to be so low that they don't have that little bit of buffer. I think, I've been conditioned over the years to fear organic matter, but I think there's definitely a number in there that it gives us a nice little safe, happy place to live in, and that buffer hold some nutrients and hold some strength for that surface to hold up through the winter time. So as you
Yeah,
can see in this
there's
yep.
yeah, it's interesting how you say the number after testing for 4 years, you're pretty comfortable at about 8%. Um, and yet I think some people would think that's way too high. And what they seem to be concerned about with that much organic matter and with not coring, so it's a combination of thinking that much organic matter is going to seal the surface and water won't go down. And also people are concerned if they don't aerate for multiple years, that they're going to have water just standing on the surface that won't go in, and you're not having that problem. And you're in a place that in the wintertime the soil is typically saturated, so any precipitation is falling on soil that is basically saturated during the wintertime.
Yeah, so I
And
do have, just to interrupt a little bit there, I do have 4 or 5 greens that do hold some water when it rains, or don't take water in when it rains. But though it's funny, talking with the previous superintendent, those have always been a problem before my time. So nothing that I've done has caused that. I watched them hold water the other day. It took a deep time through a section, and the water still stayed there. So it's not like it's the surface that's holding back that water. There's something structurally in those greens that's not allowing them to take the water in. But I go out to the front nine during that same rain event where I had some puddling on those greens, and the front nine greens have the highest organic matter on the course. There's some of them are 11% right now, and there is not a puddle to be found on those greens. So I think I have a structural issue in some greens that's causing some infiltration issues, or not infiltration, more just they don't take any water through the profile. But for the most part, the greens that don't have that issue, I had no issue with infiltration at all. But that's something that I'm watching for sure.
Yeah, that's something that I'm curious about, because when I mention to people, like, okay, maybe the greens would be better as a playing surface if they didn't have holes punched in them, if I visit another golf course. So I share some ideas of something that's on my mind. Let's make the greens better. How do we make the greens better? We we should make it so the ball rolls better. And if the ball is going to roll better, we shouldn't have holes on it. And people are rightly concerned about, what about infiltration? And
Hmm.
so that was something that I asked you on the phone on Monday. And you said, no, I'm just not really seeing that as a huge issue. So
Hmm.
I think that's something that people can evaluate on their own. But I can also share the information of, I know a lot of golf courses with uh, POA greens or bent-Poa greens have 7, 8, 9, 10, 11% organic matter in the top 2 centimeters, and we're not seeing an issue with water not going through. But then, Chaz at Oregon State University, he is seeing an issue on greens, on the research green, where they have bad infiltration, um, when they don't do any type of variation. So
So I've been playing around now with, through the 4 years of, reducing my nitrogen. So that I think it was 2022, I reduced my nitrogen a fair bit, like again 20% or so, and thought, okay, well, I'm not going to need to top dress as much because I've reduced the nitrogen, so I'm going to reduce the growth. Well, I saw a spike in my organic matter after that year. So then the next year I applied some more top dressing and reduced nitrogen again, was able to start to bring them down. But this past season, so from 2023, well, I guess it was through the season of 2023, because I took the samples at the start, I was able to reduce my overall OM2 numbers by 2% just through top dressing. So my average is now down to 8% on greens, and now I've just got some greens that are higher that I'm trying to bring down to 8%, and a few that are actually lower. So so it's been a bit of figuring out how it goes and how the greens respond. It's not just nitrogen. It's not just top dressing. It's connecting all these together to be able to achieve these results. So.
and you are we're showing an image that just shows really no thatch layer and just a little bit of sand intermingled with organic material right at the surface. That's
Hmm.
that's what I see.
Hmm.
Have you tried squeezing water out of these after, let's say, if it would rain today and if you would go to the course tomorrow? So let's say it would have been saturated today. Can you squeeze water out of that when it's at on average 8%?
I didn't do that last night because like I said, we did have 15 mils 2 days ago. But no, I don't believe I could. They were very firm even last night. Like I was throwing balls up in the air, and I mentioned I actually get a video of that, is listening to that sound when the ball drops on the green and the greens are firm and nice. And definitely that hollow sound was still there. So that was kind of my non-scientific approach to, yeah, I'm happy with this, but no, I don't think I could squeeze water out of that profile at that point. The whole profile is a little bit darker because they are saturated down through. But no, I don't think in the top you'd squeeze anything.
Cool. That's That's good. I think, TJ, uh, people may have some questions, and I think this episode, the topic that we're discussing, it seems to me that it should be a little bit surprising for people. I don't want to say that it's controversial, because we're just stating what what results you're getting and what work you're doing. But it's unconventional to manage POA greens in this way. So I imagine when I post this and share it and people watch and listen, and I welcome that, and I think you do too. It would be great if people do want to point out flaws, or people often say, well, it won't work at my place for this reason, because my golf course is much busier, or my golf course has zero tolerance for seed heads, or um, my members want me to aerify or whatever, my members won't accept a 0.125 mowing height. It has to be cut short or whatever. Um, and some people object with good reasons. Maybe some people will point out that we're missing something, and maybe your roots aren't deep enough. I don't know.
I welcome that because I won't ever I don't ever say to anybody that this is the way to do it, or I don't ever say, yeah, I'm never going to aerate again or anything along those lines. It's I like to talk about what I'm doing, and when I talk about it, I like when people have questions or maybe even concerns, because I'm just trying things and it seems to be working, and I'm going to continue down that line. There's continual refinement to figure out where it goes and how it goes, but so far so good, and hopefully it keeps going. So
Yeah, I hope so too, and I'm certainly following along closely. Uh, I'm going to change the screen now, and I'm going to play that video of the stimp meter, um, and I am going to. Oh, sorry, I can't change the screen right now. Let's just skip that, TJ.
sure.
It's going to be a technical challenge. So
Okay,
I'm not going to play the video of the ball roll. But maybe we can record that separately, and we'll make a little short video that shows that.
sure.
So we'll do an extra one that
I,
has a different screen orientation.
I just want to comment on one thing, Micah, that was a bit of a leap of faith last summer for me, was anthracnose. And continually you hear, 10th of a pound a week through the growing season, as well as, keeping your moistures adequate and keeping your heights of cut a little higher, regular intervals of top dressing and your fungicide program to avoid anthracnose. And I kind of looked at that and went, okay, well, um, I'm not going to have my nitrogen as high to be able to meet that 10th of a pound a week. So how am I going to combat anthracnose? Well, my heights are higher at 0.125. I keep my moistures up there, like we'll be 23% in the morning kind of thing. I'm not taking them down to 13% the next morning or anything like that. I've lost enough hair already. I don't need to go further. Um, and I do regular top dressings, as in every 3 weeks we go out and top dress. So those are in there. So I'm trying to and then I have a regular fungicide program. So it was a little nerve wracking to go through the summer at those low end rates, and I was worried I was going to get anthracnose, but I did not, and I was able to keep everything happy with those rates of water and top dressing and heights of cut. And I think the most important thing is not the nitrogen amount; it's that turf speedo, is keeping that turf speedo at a number that's going to be able to outgrow any pressure of anthracnose. So yeah.
That's Yeah, I talk to people who want to associate a particular nitrogen value, a particular nitrogen fertilizer value with anthracnose. And I think that the real thing that is associated with anthracnose is how rapidly the grass is growing, which is why if you put drought stress on the grass and you stop it from growing, that will really trigger anthracnose, even if you have plenty of nitrogen. And I think that's where clipping volume and the speedo can be a really good way to gauge how your grass is growing, and you will get an idea that if the grass grows a little bit too slowly, which you can measure with clipping volume, measure with the speedo, that could be your trigger, um, of okay, below this level we're really going to be at a high risk of anthracnose. And you could do that at a pound of nitrogen or at zero nitrogen, because the growth rate in some way can be a little bit detached from the nitrogen
Yeah,
in the
absolutely. And
short term. Over the long term, I think they're quite well correlated.
that's my experience with anthracnose as well, is you get a dry spot or a dry area, and that's where the anthracnose comes in. So, stress with my team, like the hose is very important to make sure that we're getting all those little spots that show up each morning, because we let them go a day or two, that's where we'll see it. So we're good with the hose, and then we can afford to back off the end somewhat, it seems. So
Okay. Well, thank you so much, TJ. I've really enjoyed talking with you. And people can, if they have some questions, they can write to us or leave comments on the YouTube version of this, or whatever. It's easy to get in touch with me through Pace Turf or through ATC. TJ, you're still on Twitter, aren't you, TJ? Or X?
I'm not. I guess my profile's still there, but no, I haven't really been on there for a year or so now. I tried to stay away from it. So
Okay,
email
so
is fine. If you want to share that in the show notes, you can share my email. I'm happy to
or yeah,
talk about. Yeah,
or write to me. Write to me. If I just post your email address, it could get scraped and go into some
gotcha.
kind of
Fair
extra
enough.
spam. So I'm not going to post it, but
Okay,
I've got your email. And if
okay,
anybody wants to contact TJ directly, just uh, just write to me through my website or contact me, and I'll put you in touch with TJ. He
yeah,
is a excellent superintendent, a fine gentleman, and I really am glad that you're getting such good results. And it's just it's similar to what Chris has said, that he's at a high end club. Chris Trittabaugh at Hazeltine National Golf Club, he's at a high end golf club with good golfers, and they tell him that the greens are great and the best they've ever been. And he's doing something similar with creeping bentgrass greens, just getting really good results, finding that he's able to cut back on some of the disruptive practices and really carefully manage the growth. It's uh it, it's it's exciting to see. And I know you uh are not the only person doing this. Chris Trittabaugh is not the only person doing this. There's other people out there that are doing this and getting good results. And there's a lot of people that don't know about this, and they're just finding out about it. And maybe they're interested to get started. So it's so good that you can share your experience, your information, uh, and what you've seen over now going into the fourth growing season as the superintendent here, right?
yes, yeah,
20, you took over in 2021.
yeah. So if January 21, I came in. So
Yeah. So 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024 is year four. That's That's pretty cool.
yeah,
I I always thought I'm not a golf course superintendent now. I used to be a golf course superintendent before I went to grad school. I always wanted to go to grad school. I want I wanted to be a superintendent overseas, get some international experience, and then I wanted to go to grad school so I could know how to be a scientist and to have formal training in more of these topics about soils and chemistry and plants and grass and so on, and data analysis and statistics. I wanted to learn that, but I thought, I would then be in a good position to perhaps be a uh, a scientist for a company, or perhaps be a professor, or perhaps be a golf course superintendent. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I thought I could be a golf course superintendent. But one thing about being a golf course superintendent that I could foresee into the future was I wasn't so excited about it's autumn again, time to clean up the leaves. And it's this time again, time to be worried about anthracnose, time to put out or time to put out our crabgrass spray, or time to put out our anthracnose preventative. Just the seasonal repetition, um, part of the job didn't sound so interesting to me if I was just working at just one property. And of course, I never was a superintendent long enough to really have to deal with any of that. But it seems to me that what you're doing, TJ, with this type of speedo, clipping volume, OM246, paying attention to the nitrogen rate, paying attention to how many times you mow per year, paying attention to all these things makes it seem dynamic in a way that I think, to me, it should make the job more fun. I think there's no, to me, there's like no more repetition, or the repetition mindset kind of goes away because you're just reacting to the grass, reacting to the weather, responding with the work that needs to be done right now, the best that you can tell.
and it is a lot of fun. It's a challenge for sure. I like a challenge. That's why I'm doing it. But it is a lot of fun, and it's fun working as a team. You know, I mentioned my two assistants, and my previous assistant before has moved on to be a super now. But working together through this program, they buy in. We kind of reinforce each other. When I go, oh man, I really want to put some nitrogen out, they go, no, no, it'll be okay. Wait another week. We can always put it down, and we can't take it back. So let's just see what happens over the next few days. And sure enough, sun comes out I never make a nitrogen decision on an overcast day. They always look pretty lean. So when the sun comes out, I go, yeah, we're doing okay. So it's great to work as a team. It definitely there's not monotony involved, and we're always playing with the levers, whether that's a little bit of nitrogen or the top dressing amount or the mow and the roll, and it's a lot of fun for sure. So, and thank you, Micah. I mean, the reason that I'm here doing this is because of your work and Jason and Chris and Bjarni, and I continually get reinforcement and inspired by listening to you guys on these podcasts, and gives me the motivation to keep pushing and keep trying to figure it out. So
Well, thank you for those kind words, and enjoy the weekend.
yeah, you as
Thanks.
well. Thank
Thank
you.
thanks everyone for listening and for watching. And I will be back soon with another good episode after this one. But for now, I'll sign off for ATC from the San Juan Islands in Washington. Bye bye.